Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drop-In CEO Live Talk Media. And I am joined today with my special guest, Alain Hunkins. And I am so excited that you've joined me again today. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. But just a little bit about Alain, if you don't already know him, he has been a guest on the Drop-In CEO podcast, episode 15. Please catch it. But he is also the CEO of Hunkins Leadership Group, a Forbes contributor, author of Cracking the Leadership Code, and a TEDx speaker. Alain, it is my pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Deb. It's my pleasure to be with you today. Thanks.
So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for some amazing content. And I just want to bring in a conversation aligned with my theme. I do want to go into a little bit about some of the basics or elements of cracking the leadership code. But in my conversations this week about succession planning, we invest so much in the people that we bring into our company. They're very talented. But as leaders, we have a responsibility to also assure that we have a succession plan for sustainability of the company. But before we go into that, I would love for you to share with a little bit with our audience here about your work in cracking the leadership code.
Sure. So the book Cracking the Leadership Code was based on 20 plus years of experience in the field working with leaders and teams and organizations. So it wasn't something I just sat down and wrote. It actually emerged out of organic conversations, sessions, and really digging into the mindset and the skill sets of what it takes to be a great leader. Turns out that great leaders have certain things in common. And, lousy leaders have certain things in common as well. And what I found over all the work was 3 meta skills emerged. And these are connection, communication, and collaboration. So that became the subtitle of the book, The 3 Secrets to Building Strong Leaders. And I think as important as it is to give aspiring leaders prescriptive, here are things you can do, I think equally, if not more so important, is to focus on what are the things that are going to get in your way. Because the principles, you hear them, connection, communication, collaboration, they sound simple, and they are simple, but they're not easy. Because if they were easy, we'd have a much better percentage of good leaders. And last time I checked, only about 23% of people believe their leaders lead well. So the book is really designed to be a roadmap to help you accelerate and shorten your leadership learning curve, because we're all on this journey at some point. And so the goal was to give people practical steps, tools, and tips to look at your mindset and skill sets to become the leader that you want to be.
So staying with that a little bit, what do you talk about in a little bit more depth are some of those barriers? You mentioned mindset barriers, skill barriers. What are some of the most common barriers you see?
Yeah, one of the biggest mindset barriers is the fact that so many leaders who wind up in leadership roles got there because they were high performers who got stuff done. So it's a strength. On the one level, it got you there. However, being a high performer is very different than facilitating high performance in others. And you don't close that gap by just doing more of what you know. And so the biggest mindset shift is getting away from being the commander in chief, the one who's this competent, achieving doer, and becoming much more of what I call the facilitative mindset. And the word facilitate comes from the French word facile, which means easy. So the challenge in our very complicated, complex, high-tech digital age is, how do you facilitate achieving performance goals easier? People are crying out, they're yearning for leaders who can make life and just make our efforts easier so we can achieve things. So that's one of the biggest mindset shifts that people need to make.
That is so aligned, and I'll put a little plug for my book as well, The CEO's Compass, coming out in August of this year. And I talk about that so often, to your point, we elevate these leaders, and we should, but we lack the skills or a plan for succession or helping them to elevate those skills. And like you say, people can report into you as the leader. On the other hand, if you see those dynamics between people, not being able to have good conversations if there happens to be a gap, being able to provide or receive feedback, or if you have to have a conversation because there's a conflict, a conversation map. So leaders no longer sit back and get reported to and ask questions about why are we on or not on track, but seeing the dynamics and being able to eliminate those barriers and give people those skills. I love the work, and I wish more people recognize that that's what our role is as a leader now.
Yeah, it has really shifted, and it's amazing how many leaders are still operating from an industrial age playbook. Because the fact is, if you think about that, kind of tell people what to do, here are targets, it worked to a point in a much more static, slow, less dynamic age. And it's so out of date now, it's like the dinosaur. And so I hope that leaders can get with what we need to do because the data around this is so clear.
I also write an article about this. I call it, three different kinds of leaders, or I actually, no, it's about why can't everybody be a high performer? But in society, the industrial age, we have to put people in a bucket. You got your high performers because they're your subject matter experts, they deliver. You got your steady eddies, and then you've got your poor performers. But I challenge that assumption because it's a mindset. Leaders should be able to look at everybody and perhaps see them as a high performer and what treatment is needed for each person along the way for succession planning, because you should think about everybody as having an opportunity to perform and have a higher impact. Amazing stuff. I'd love to just switch this a little bit. Let's just
Sure.
go into succession planning. So I'm wondering, you've been around 20 years around different industries. Talk to me a little bit about leadership that has done well in the area of succession planning framework. I'm actually very curious because there's so many organizations that need a better way of doing this.
Yeah, I know before we came on camera, we were talking about the fact that so much of succession planning, the issues with teams and organizations having good or bad succession planning is very much similar in some ways to teams that have good and or bad leadership. And here's the general, again, it starts with mindset.
Mm.
So to have a good succession plan means you see your people not as static role fillers, but as organic grow people who grow and develop, and that you actually start by focusing on the person first, realizing this person is a pool of potential. And as I look at you, I see this potential and I think strategically, long-term, big picture about how can that potential shape and grow and ultimately be so good that me in my current role, I'm not going to be needed anymore. And so many leaders, the idea of I'm not needed because I've grown my successors is such a threat to the ego. And so we tend to put people in those functional buckets or those boxes of, I've hired you to do this job and you do this. And then succession planning becomes this afterthought that sort of has to get stapled in after the fact, when in fact, we should be having people conversations all the time. And too many organizations, if you think about, and just everyone who's listening can think about this for a moment. If you think about your typical business meeting, your monthly operating meeting, whatever it might be, what's the first thing you talk about in those meetings after you give your hellos? It's the numbers, right? You're talking about the numbers. And then maybe you get to the projects. And if there's a little bit of time left, you might talk about the people. Well, here's a revolutionary concept. What if you flipped that? What if you prioritize talking about your people and what they're doing and how they're doing it and what their strengths are first? Right? Trust me, you're not going to run out of time and forget about the numbers. Right? So I think we have this fear that somehow if we don't vault the numbers, that somehow they're going to get not taken care of. And the weird thing, if you think about any number, any metric that we measure, whether it's sales, profit, revenue, quality, those numbers are just a lagging indicator of the behavior of people, right? Sales don't sell themselves. Products don't sell themselves. There's people involved making all that happen. So succession planning boils down to this mindset of let us see our people as the real reason that the business is happening and have that conversation front and center.
So I love what you say because it resonates so much with me. I also have used that analogy of flipping the pyramid, often starting a meeting with what went well yesterday, last week, et cetera, and just talk about how people feel. And I also have a similar thought when it comes to, first of all, you should be having monthly one-to-ones with your people. And it don't start with the numbers. Don't continue with the projects, but start with personal development. And how can we remove the barriers from the work that they're doing to elevate them? And I will tell you, when I did that proposal to a global company, a global meeting that I had about here's how I'm going to lead and develop my people, and here's my vision and why. And when I got to the very end with the numbers, they said I didn't spend enough time on the numbers. And so I realized very soon that that was no longer the place for me. We need to work on the people because they're the greatest tool in your toolbox. Develop the people, they're going to create amazing results. So, succession planning, it sounds so easy.
Yeah.
Actionable tips for the leader. What should they be doing now if they aren't doing it? And don't wait for HR to make it an annual event. What can they do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on some of this already. Number one is connect, right? So connect with your people. Like make sure you're building real, genuine human connections. And those connections should start with questions too. So think about, I'm a big believer and I must coach at least twice a week. I'm telling this to one of my coachees, which is leaders, we need to make the implicit assumptions explicit. So don't pretend like succession planning is something that you're going to get to later on. Start having conversations that are, we'll call it succession planning ish, right? So talk to me about what are you hoping to do? Where are your strengths? Where do you see yourself? And having these conversations now and looking for ways for you to start aligning the desires, the aspirations of your people with the needs of the business and starting to put some of those things together. Start thinking about so someone shares something, say, great, how could you then either mentor someone else with the knowledge that you've demonstrated or be mentored by someone else, so that everything isn't coming top down. Again, that's old school model. It's like, how can we start to facilitate moving information from where it is to where it can go so that we're building our bench strength, our reservoir of knowledge, and there's more and more insight happening all around. I was reading a survey from LinkedIn recently. The number one reason people say they will leave a job is their inability to learn and grow. And we see this especially with the millennials and Gen Z in the workplace. And so we should be on the lookout in terms of succession planning. This shouldn't be like you said, a one and done once a year, let's wait for performance review. This should be a part of our conversations, just in the same way that many organizations are going away from the annual performance review and moving towards much more dynamic, informal performance conversations. I think we should be bringing succession planning into the mix of these conversations because development should be a daily thing. Because if you think about any skill that you want to get better at, you need to practice. It isn't something like, oh, I want to be a better golfer. I'm going to go play golf for 2 days really intensely once a year and I'll get like, no, it's consistent, deliberate, intentional practice. And that's true in golf. It's true in succession planning. It's true in every aspect of leadership.
One of the things I love what you said is, being a facilitator, that, you only have so much bandwidth yourself to perhaps focus on the development of your people, but sometimes recognizing here's the end game. I need help. Can I get other people to help in the mentoring process? Perhaps leverage external resources such as yourself and myself and have a holistic approach and be able to be a facilitator and have a more sustainable future because you thought about succession planning. And I think succession planning could actually be employment lead magnet because people know that you develop them for a career, not just a salary.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if you were going in to an interview or your first day on the job and these were the conversations you were having, how much more excited you might be
Yeah.
about it? I mean, it's tremendous.
So you have so much to offer, and I am grateful for this conversation. So I know people may want to reach out and learn more about your work and your offers. How can people connect with you? And any last thoughts or resources for people watching?
Yeah, certainly. So my social media of choice is LinkedIn. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. There's only one Alain Hunkins, so that makes it really easy. And then I'd say in terms of resources, I just updated my website. It's Alain Hunkins, AlainHunkins.com. All sorts of links there. I run a periodic 30-day leadership challenge about 3 times a year. That is open enrollment. You can find out more information there. There's links to articles, all the things I'm writing for Forbes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop me a line there. My goal and my mission is really to help people to become the leaders that we all want to be. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Amazing work. I look forward to continuing to support you and continue success. Thank you for being a guest on today's show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Deborah. Thanks so much.